Well, ladies and gentlemen, Nimacomakuntik, tansai, nemyatanye, atawapamtikok. Thank you very much for coming out here today. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why this is important. In this election, when I was talking a little bit earlier about how it's important and how we decide the future of our country, elections actually do decide the future because it charts a course, and you can choose one direction or you can go in another direction. And that's why you need to come out and vote. That's why you need to ask your neighbors to come out and vote, the young people to come out and vote. That's why leaders in the Indigenous community we need to ask our peoples to come out and vote. Newcomers, everyone, seniors need to come out and vote because it actually does make a difference. This election is going to be about a choice, and it's going to be a stark choice. It's going to be a choice between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Do you want to go back to the decade with Stephen Harper and... Or no, I hear no's out there. Or do you want to continue with the path that we have charted forward with this team, not only Team Winnipeg, but the team that we have in Ottawa, which is doing fantastic things. And I'm going to list those things off because when we came to office in 2015, we had child poverty in this country, which was rampant. Child poverty, which was absolutely terrible. In 1988, there was an NDP motion in the House of Commons to eradicate child poverty by the year 2000. Now, no one did anything for decades, even though we said we were going to unanimously eradicate child poverty by the year 2000. But in 2015, when we were elected, when I was elected with your help last time, our collective effort, we brought in place the Canada's Child Benefit, and that has lifted 300,000 children out of poverty across our country. That is the lowest rates of child poverty in Canadian history. That is real. That is actually truth, and it actually makes a difference. Maybe not on this side of Portage, down in this part of our neighborhood, our community. It makes a difference over in this part, north of Portage. It makes a difference in the West End, in the western areas. It makes a difference in the downtown core, in the South Point Douglas neighborhoods. It makes a difference because I have met mothers who say, I now have some money that I can actually buy some shoes for my children, that they don't have to have one pair of shoes that year, they can actually have two pairs. I remember having my mother having to go to the Safeway. She couldn't rub two nickels together, and we'd have to choose between either buying the bread or the milk. And my mother would say, do you want to have bread and the margarine tonight, or do you want to have the cereal with the milk? And we say, well, we have cereal at home. There's sugar, so that, that's tasty. So let's get the Kellogg's with the sugar and we'll have the milk. So, but I remember having to dig through garbage cans in the back alleys like this. Back alleys in order. It's a porter. And I remember having to dig through the garbage cans in order to find pop bottles or beer bottles in order to return them, in order to get 5 cents, a nickel, in order to help pay for that milk or for that bread. That shouldn't happen in our country, or we're such a rich nation. So the Canada Child Benefit in Winnipeg Centre goes to 15,710 children with an average payment of $790. It is literally $6.8 million every month into the pockets and into the local economy where people can buy their bread and milk. That is actually true. That is what is actually happening right now. And you should all be very proud about the effort that we put in 2015. Not only are we looking after our young people, lifting them up, but we're also looking out for our seniors. We have increased the old age security, guaranteed income supplement. We reduced the age of retirement from 67 to 65. Now, I've heard the Conservatives want to raise the age of retirement again to 67. But I know far too many people who, when they hit 65, now they have an adequate income. And yet the Conservatives want to put those goalposts a little bit farther away from us. Let us not go there again. Let us continue lifting hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty. We look around us as we drive in our neighborhoods, and often there are people who are on the streets begging. They're asking for money. There are 1,500 homeless people in our city. We did 2 censuses to discover how many there were. First time we had data because we believe in science and we believe in data. And we use that data now to start crafting a policy to get homeless people off the streets. These are our fellow citizens. These are our fellow human beings. No one in such a rich nation should go homeless. So we have now put $50 million to End Homelessness Winnipeg, an organization, a community entity to help reduce homelessness in our city, get more people off the streets. And if we don't believe it's a problem, 1,500 homeless people in Winnipeg, 2,000 in Vancouver. We are a much smaller city with a far larger challenge that we face, and we need to address it. We have, since I've been elected in 2015, $108 million invested into social housing in our city, into Winnipeg Centre alone. $108,949,343 to be exact. Just over here in the Wolseley area, we helped build the Old Grace Co-op, a co-op housing project, $30,000 grant for every unit to help lift up families, seniors, all people who are in need in our city, to make sure that we live and we rub shoulders together. This is why this is important. The newcomer population. When the Conservatives were in power, what they did was cuts by stealth. So in fact, they allocate the budget, but then they actually don't spend the money. They don't hire the civil service to do the job necessary. So spousal unification. Imagine you come to Canada and you want to bring your spouse. You're a PR, you're a citizen. You want to bring your spouse to Canada. It took 72 months under the Conservatives. 72 months is 5 years. Imagine that, being separated from your family, from your children. That is unhumane, that is anti-human rights. We invested $348 million because I was on the finance committee when we allocated those funds, and we got that down to a processing time of 12 months to bring families together. That is actually real progress. Now, when the Conservatives come to power, they're going to do the same things. They're going to do those cuts by stealth. They're going to make sure the processing times take too long. They're going to cut the workers' permits. They're going to make sure it takes too long. They're going to cut the veterans' services and make sure it takes too long. Cuts those little departments and don't spend the money. They're also, as we know, when Doug Ford was elected in Ontario, he cut the Indigenous Services Department by 27% when he came to office in his first budget. We have just started on the path of reconciliation in this country. And we have 152 years in order to build bridges with our fellow citizens, the Indigenous peoples. Was on the doorsteps with Jim Bear, who is a former chief of Broken Head First Nation. And we were out on the doors yesterday working hard. And he was telling me the story. Thank you, Jim, for volunteering yesterday, by the way. I appreciate that. When we were first elected in 2015, the spending every year for Indigenous children in the schools on reserves was $6,500, which was below the national average for all other children. Since we've been elected, we've actually brought it to the Canadian average, which was $16,000 per child, and we've actually gone beyond that. We were actually at $18,500 in spending for the children who are on reserve, to make up for the difference, to make sure that they have a good education, because we know that as adults, yes, we know as adults that we are imperfect, yet if we train our children, if we look to the future, we can actually ensure that they will do things better than us, and we will actually create the society that we want in this country. Now, when we first came to office, we had spending on $11.5 billion under Stephen Harper for Indigenous peoples. And now we're up to $18.5 billion per year for Indigenous peoples. This is real investment. This is actually getting stuff done. And this is why this election is important. It's important not only in this riding, it's important in Charleswood. Now, I know some of you have friends in other parts of the city, in other parts of the province. You need to mobilize them, get them out to vote. You need to excite them. You need to say this is important. I know there has also been difficulties. People wonder, leadership is always difficult. But in Ottawa, I have my fellow teammates, the team members who make up the team. Some of them have PhDs, doctorates, who are very caring individuals. We come from various backgrounds and we want to work together. And we are working together. People like Catherine McKenna who care about the environment. We have built a plan to address climate change. As our young people were calling out on the media last night on TV at the United Nations, In Canada, we went to Paris to sign on to the global accord, the global agreement. We have a plan now in place which we signed with all the provinces, all the territories, all the Indigenous leadership, the NGOs, the scientists. We all work together. Let us not stop now, midway through. Let us not stop and say, let us change direction, because we're not going to get where we need to get to if we start over and over and over again going between governments. This is why this election is important for our young people, for our future. It is important for Indigenous peoples. It is important for newcomers, and it is important for our seniors and our young people. It is important for each and every one of us, lifting us out of poverty. And that is why I need you to come out and volunteer to make sure that we continue to lift up this government, to lift up our people in a positive way, to make sure that we build the country of human rights that we all need and desire. So I'm sure my campaign manager back there is saying, Robert, you need to slow down, you stop speaking so fast, but I want to get out this message, and I speak like this in Parliament too. Sometimes I get emotional and I'm unapologetic about it, because I love this job, I love what I do, I love making a difference in the lives of people. I'd like to invite a few people up here to come with me.